Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where we talk about the Constitution, politics, history, or pretty much anything else I want to talk about. This podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, not iTunes anymore, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Also, I believe it's on Tumblr now. You can see this podcast if you go to YouTube and type in Annette Talks, and pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts, we're there. And today is going to be one of those other category topics. And I like to do this because I don't like to limit myself. When a really great topic comes up, I want to cover it. And this is one of those that's kind of near and dear to my heart because I've been in therapy. So we're going to be talking about a new book out by Dr. Christy Kane. Hi, Christy.
Hello.
And you sent this book to me maybe a week ago, and I just buzzed right through it because it was so gripping. So this book is called Fractured Souls and Splintered Memories. And I should preface it by saying that you are a licensed counselor, right? You have a PhD in, or a doctorate in clinical psychology and a master's degree in mental health counseling.
Correct.
And so you are a counselor and you've been doing this for a long time.
Correct.
And so you decided to write this book.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about why you decided to write the book, what it's about, what the purpose is.
So this book is a true story of a therapeutic healing relationship between a therapist and a client. So the reason I decided to go ahead and share their story is because so many people do not have a good picture as to what happens inside a therapeutic office. And this book gives readers a very intimate, in-depth look at that process.
Yes, it does. And you know what? It actually kind of reads like a novel. And that's probably one of the reasons why I got pulled in so quickly. And also the fact that I've been in therapy. I've seen a couple of therapists, one when I was married, trying to fix the marriage, but also just on my own. And I felt like I was back in therapy again, in a good way. Like I cried a lot, not only because it reminded me of my own therapy, but because the client in this book, which you called her Michelle in the book, she just lived through some horrific things growing up that were amazing to me that anyone would survive. And so you could really feel for her. I mean, I just can't imagine living through the abuse. She went through physical abuse, sexual abuse from family members that she, should have been able to trust. And it's heart-wrenching.
Yeah, it is a difficult read, but I think it allows all of us to pause for a moment and think about our lives and the trauma that we each need to heal from. We're not going to get out of this life without experiencing difficult moments. And, oftentimes people will read this manuscript and say, wow, my life wasn't that bad. And I say, it's not about comparison. It's about recognizing that all of us need to be able to heal. And sometimes that healing comes from talking with a friend, but there's real moments when a mental health professional is needed. And sometimes that mental health journey can be one session. Sometimes it can be several months, but it is a beautiful gift when it's combined with an existential journey of faith so that healing can come to pass.
Yeah, I really loved that element of the book, that they brought in the spiritual side and that there's a spiritual component to therapy when it's done right. Because, every time I go into counseling to see my counselor, we both happen to be of the same faith, but I pray about it ahead of time that the spirit will be there and that she'll know how to help me with my problems. And she does the same. And so we get in there and there are oftentimes when the spirit is very strong there, and it helps me to see what it is that she's trying to help me to see, or to give me the right tools for whatever it is I'm trying to work on. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I related so strongly to this book, because I recognize that relationship that you can have when you find the right therapist for your situation. And I'm actually a really big believer that everybody needs therapy. Like, I don't know anyone, I don't think I've ever met anyone where I thought they don't need any therapy. Like, because I just feel like you said, everyone's going to have something. And I can't remember who said it. I heard a quote somewhere where someone said that they save up money to give their kids when they turn 18 to move out of the house, like a couple of $1,000s, so that they can have therapy, because they know that no kid's going to get out of childhood, no matter how good of a job you think you're doing. And most of us, at least me, I feel like I'm screwing up a good 50 to 75% of the time. And so I just think, boy, I know that's an issue my kids are going to have to work on. No matter how hard I try, they're going to come out with something. And if it wasn't from me or their other parent, it might be something that happened at school or with friends or with other relatives or whatever, but nobody escapes childhood without some kind of issues.
Right. Well, and, I agree with you. And I think always seeking a second perspective can be beneficial. Now, it is very much about that relationship. In the book, you'll see that there's a very wonderful relationship between the client and the therapist. And people need to understand that when they're going to see a therapist, they should be interviewing the therapist as much as the therapist is interviewing them, so that they feel like there is that connection. Evidence-based research shows that one of the most powerful plays in bringing about change is that connection with your therapist. And so I enjoyed being able to write this book because Michelle had such a beautiful connection with her therapist, and both of them changed, and both of them grew during the process of this journey. I also like the fact that you mentioned the spiritual side. We know in a lot of research that psychology indicates those who believe in a higher power, or those who have some type of belief system, recover quicker in the therapeutic process than those who do not. And so having that existential journey, that belief that life has a purpose, that it's not just about suffering and pain and darkness, and also that powerful belief that one can heal, no matter how dark or how deep the healing might be. It may take time, but it is possible. And I think you also see within the pages of this book work, right? Therapy requires deep, hard, gut-wrenching work to bring about change. And sometimes people will say they go to therapy and, oh, it didn't work. Well, therapy is about you as a client and your journey and the work you want to do. Usually your therapists have gone through their doctorate or graduate program and had to go see a therapist themselves, because it's usually the requirement in our degrees, right? And so it's not about my work as a therapist, it's about your work. And so I think this book I just think it's a beautiful insight into the truth, and it takes away the mystery of therapy.
Yeah, and what struck me again and again, well, first of all, I think the spiritual component brings hope. And that's something that you maybe didn't have before you went to therapy, because you just thought you were stuck with whatever it was that you were dealing with. But the work part, to me, the hardest part, and I think it comes through in the book, is that willingness to be vulnerable, like really vulnerable, because you have all this stuff inside of you that maybe you've never talked about with anyone, or you've only kind of scratched the surface. But to be willing to go in and open up to somebody about your deepest, darkest secrets that you've been trying to keep to yourself to protect yourself, but to be willing to be that vulnerable and know that you're sitting across from someone who you're afraid that might judge you or not understand you. To be that vulnerable is not easy.
No, and as readers read the book, they'll see how deep that vulnerability went, because I know, as I was given the privilege of telling the story, the disclosure that this client makes so that she can heal, especially within her culture and her personal belief system, was not an easy process.
Yeah, it was interesting. I related again to the times where she would show up and be sit in her car and not be sure whether she wanted to go in to see the therapist, where she would want to sit on the opposite side of the room from the therapist. You know, it was this push-pull of, she really wanted to do this, but she was also so afraid. She wanted to cancel appointments. You know, she was wearing sunglasses in one of her therapy appointments. This feeling that we all have when we're ready to do something that's going to be really difficult, but we know we need to do it. Watching her go through those mental gymnastics of, I don't want to do this, but I know I need to do this. That was really true to life. So I can attest to the fact that that's really the way it is. Like, you want to go, you're excited to go, you make the appointment, and then you realize, oh, this is going to be hard. This is going to be really hard.
Growth in life is not an easy process. And I know in my years of, because I specialized as well in treating clients who have been physically, emotionally, and sexually abused, growth is painful as we clean out wounds, but the results of that growth is amazing. Letting go of darkness, letting go of secrets, finally talking about difficult things, even just that, allowing yourself to say it out loud is healing.
Yeah, I liked the metaphor of opening the boxes, that she had all these boxes that were inside of her that she had kept closed and like off in the basement kind of thing. Not going to deal with this stuff. And so one by one, she and the therapist are bringing the box out, opening it up, and going through the contents of it together. And so there were so many times when the therapist could have said, I know what's in that box and this is what's in that box, but instead she had Michelle verbalize what was in that box. She worked with her until she was ready to verbalize it, because it was important for Michelle, the client, to say it instead of the therapist to say it. And I thought, yeah, that is incredibly freeing and healing to be able to say, this is something that's been so forbidden for me to even think about, let alone talk about, and to be able to bring it out and talk about it in a therapeutic environment is, I mean, it's incredible. It's an awesome thing.
Yeah.
So do you think there's anything, I mean, she went through so much trauma in her life, where, I mean, I've never known anyone that I know of that's gone through as much as she went through. Is there ever anyone that comes through your doors that you think, I can't help this person, they've gone through too much?
Well, I believe there are cases when healing will come in the next life. You know, there will be healing now, but complete healing will come. And even in the case of this particular client, even after the therapy ended, I'm fairly certain the healing journey continued to move forward, you know, and in a perhaps less gut-wrenching process, because she really, I mean, as I penned those chapters, I have to admit, there were moments when it took my breath away. You know, when I was writing it, I was like, oh my gosh, you know. And so I think for all of us, the healing through our faith is a eternal principle, because we're always getting battle wounds and scars in the process of life. Right. And so we're always needing to heal. But I think after Michelle had done that, you know, that big bulk of healing, she also walked away with tools now that when perhaps other, I don't know, memories come up for her, I'm not so sure, because, you know, I'm only hypothesizing, but she then possessed the tools to be able to walk through them. She also possessed the tools to engage in more healthy relationships and to make sure that she was mindful of protecting herself and being able to express her needs and set boundaries. And so she gained a lot of skill sets through that process that then she can maintain that constant healing as her life moves forward.
Right. It's never over. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm done now with therapy, and so everything's all good, I don't have to worry about that anymore. Because I know even with me, the stuff that I've worked on really hard in therapy, it's never 100% gone. I'll get triggered by something, but I now have some tools that I can use. And I also will call the therapist if I need to go see her again. If like, you get into a place where it's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to, I sometimes freak out, and then I make an appointment, I go see her, and she reminds me, I'm like, oh yes. And so I'm writing it down. That's one of the things I like to do in therapy too, is write down what the advice that I'm given, so I don't, doesn't just leave my head later and I don't remember. But it is a lifelong process. But if you can get therapy for the most difficult parts, I think it makes it a lot easier to work through the, I don't know, aftershocks, I guess. I don't know another way of putting it, but you can handle better the stuff that comes after the big bulk work, as opposed to just either ignoring it and letting it affect the rest of your life, or trying to, tiptoe around those boxes. And life is not fun when you're not dealing with your stuff. And we know that when we come in contact with some person who has not worked through their stuff, and they will keep hurting and hurting, they'll go into failed relationship after failed relationship, or bad situation after bad situation. If they could go and get that healing, they could maybe stop that process. Or like in the book, she fortunately did not pass on those issues to her children that she grew up with. She did not abuse her kids, which is a miracle, because you always expect that. But if you've been abused and you're going to have kids, I think that therapy is a must, because you want to break that cycle of abuse.
It's interesting. I don't know if you know this, Annette, but most individuals who grow up being abused as children don't end up abusing their children. There was research done a long time ago that was actually inaccurate and wrong, that kind of started that belief system. You will see some domestic violence areas, like, if a young man grows up in a home where the dad is abusive to his wife, then sometimes you see that pattern. And not always, some parents, but usually parents who've grown up in abusive situations go the exact opposite direction. Because they know what it was like. And so oftentimes they won't repeat that. Now some will, it's not a all or nothing. But oftentimes they tend to err in the exact opposite direction, which isn't always beneficial either, because sometimes they're way too lenient or whatever. But
yeah, that's true. I can think of one issue in particular that I grew up with, that I have made like a huge point of doing the opposite with my kids than the way I was brought up. And so I have to sometimes look at it and go, no, let's make sure you're not going overboard.
And so
going the opposite.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. But you definitely grow up with a lot of scars when you've been abused as a child that need to be healed. The other thing I really liked about this book is that the client had a friend that she could talk to after her therapy sessions. And so she would reach out to him and talk. And I think that's tremendously helpful. Non-judgmental, supportive, loving, safe place, basically, to talk to.
I tell clients who begin a similar journey as Michelle did, it's about the relationship with a therapist, and it's about having your person, because as therapists, we're not always available. We have other clients to see, and there's boundaries that are set by licensure rules. And so having that person that, when you're just really mad or frustrated, that you can call and say, I quit, and they can remind you not to quit or whatever, was very effective. And that was a sweet part of that book was, as Michelle talked about, her person, that she knew was there as she went through that,
Yeah, I had a sister I was able to do that with. I can remember vividly calling her after therapy sessions on the way home and downloading basically everything to her that I just learned. And also the neat thing about that is that you get to kind of reiterate what you learned in therapy when you're telling it to someone else, especially someone who's supportive and their safe place to talk, because they'll help you. Like they'll keep supporting you, so you'll keep going on that journey.
Yeah, and I think in the book you see Michelle's friend reminding her over and over not to quit and that she can do it. And sometimes it just takes that one person in your corner saying, you got this, right?
Yeah.
And I like that you use that phrase, non-judgmental.
Mhm.
All of us need to be able to know that we can be real and vulnerable with a person and not be judged.
Yeah, I think it's a hard thing to find today. I mean, it feels like it, but that's, I say a good therapist is worth their weight in gold, but also a good friend that is non-judgmental. Same thing. If you can find those things, then you can make it.
And it's interesting. I find from my own personal perspective, when someone, for most of us, not always, there's always the black sheep in the family, right? But when most of us have the privilege of someone opening up and being vulnerable with us, tenderness usually comes into the room versus judgment. But it's interesting, the culture tends to imply a fear of being judged, which then backs people up from being vulnerable and from sharing. But I know in my lifetime, whether I've been sitting in a meeting and someone has finally taken the risk to say, hey, I struggle with depression, there hasn't appeared this cultural perspective of judgment, but more understanding. And then when that has been said, it's been interesting how others have joined in and said, so do I. So I think there's one thing that I loved about this book. I mean, there's a lot I loved about the book, obviously, because I wrote it, so I'm biased. But I also think it allows us to realize the human connection comes from vulnerability, not plasticity, not showing the perfect life,
Right.
but allowing people to see our mess and to know that we're striving to do our best, and allowing people to step in and to offer comfort. But we have this paralysis in our society of, oh my gosh, I can't tell them because then they're going to judge me. And yet I don't think most people do. I think most people, even if they don't know what to do, even if they're like, whoa, I don't know what to say, I don't know that as much judgment comes as compassion, because that's how we're wired as humans, is to give compassion.
Well, and because we all have something, we all have issues, we all have problems. And so when one person, it's kind of neat when one person opens up and other people start feeling the ability to open up as well. Even something as silly as on Facebook, I posted the other day that I said, who needs enemies when you have a 13-year-old? Because I had just walked through my house getting ready to leave the door, and my 13-year-old looked over at me and she said, oh, you look so old with that long blonde hair. And I was like, it was like being smacked in the face,
Yeah.
And so I'm a single mom, so I don't have a husband at home to like and turn to and go, can you believe that? So I sometimes will go on Facebook and put little things like that just to be kind of funny, but real at the same time. Like, I don't want to air dirty laundry, but I want to reach out and say, look, I'm having a hard time with this. And I just had comment after comment after comment about, yeah, you know what? I'm going through the same thing right now with my teenager. And so I think I may actually start a parents of teenagers group, because there's a lot of us out there who are going through the same thing. And as soon as one of us opens up to say, I'm going through it, other people are like, yeah, me too. And so I had, people give me book recommendations and say, I don't know. I had one lady say, I don't know if I'm going to make it through my teenager's years right now. And so I really do think I need to start a group, even if it's just a Zoom online group, because we tend to forget that there are other people out there going through the same thing that we are.
Yep.
So, well, I think the book is fabulous. And again, it's called Fractured Souls and Splintered Memories. And it's by Christy Kane. Where can this book be found?
So Amazon has it for pre-sale right now. The book is due to be released the first part of July. And so it's for sale on Amazon. And I just would love for people to buy it and then leave a review, because books do better if they get reviews. And so please pre-order it and then leave a book review. And so they can get it. They can also get it at Cedar Fort, and that's the publisher of the book.
All right. Excellent. Is there any other advice or anything else you want to say before we wrap this up?
It's a great book for people to buy if anyone knows that someone's struggling and you think they need to go to therapy, but maybe they're not quite there. This is a great gift in taking away the myth behind, what goes on in the office. So, and I think it's applicable across genders. I think it's applicable for anyone who's seeking to risk to heal.
Awesome. Well, I can't recommend it highly enough. I thought it was wonderful. And let me know when it comes out. I will share it on my Facebook page as well. And then we can get some people over to Amazon and check this out.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds great.
Again, it's Fractured Souls and Splintered Memories by Dr. Christy Kane. And thank you, Dr. Kane, for coming on and chatting with us today. And we'll be chatting soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, where freedom lovers gather.